Well, good morning once again. So we're going to be running the commission live through here. Do we going to able to do the sound test there, Zinc?
I mean, as much as I'll have to see when the feed comes up. I can't really test the feed, but I mean, everything else is going fine. So yeah, we'll see when the browser comes up if we
All
can
right,
hear them
so
or
we should be
not.
good to go.
Yeah,
All
it's
right,
been working
perfect.
so far though. Now that I've got it ferreted out, it seems to have been fine last couple times. So we'll see.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Good, good. All right, so we should be good to go. Feel free. We got another 17, 18 minutes here. Pardon me, before the commission gets rolling here. So, how was everyone's weekend there? Hopefully, everyone had a good weekend, and yesterday wasn't Monday's not too bad of a day to miss anyways. It's always a rough start. So hopefully everyone had a good Monday. And how's everyone's Tuesday going so far? What's everyone's thoughts on? Look at the price of diesel here in the Maritimes. Wow, over $3. Gotta love how this system's working here, right? You know, the gas prices go up, well, next is the food. So the cycle continues. How far will we go? Will we be paying $20 for a loaf of bread by next year? Pretty insane. Yeah, I'm just scrolling through the Twitter feed. Do you have those links available there, my man Zinc?
Working on it. I'll have it up in a couple minutes.
Sounds good, mon ami. Merci beaucoup. Morning, Hackets. You know, I can't even buy a blue check mark if I wanted to. That's funny. Funny stuff. Even Twitter segregates. You, your technology is not compatible. Even technology segregates. It's funny. I don't need no stinking blue check mark anyways. So there we go. We shared it across all the community spaces across Canada here. So that's awesome. So we're gonna make morning Hackets. How you doing? Morning Jody, Adrian, Charlene, everyone.
Okay, so all the links should be both in the comments and now it's up in the nest there.
Excellent. I'll get those shared out right away. Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Well, did I get zapped already? Maybe no. I'm not seeing it yet. I don't hear you there, Hackets, if you're talking, brother.
Yeah, I think I'm having connection issues. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good there.
Yeah, Twitter. I don't know. Twitter's that hit and miss crappy app that seems to work when it wants to.
No, that's just our lovely internet service Canada provides, I think, ultimately, eh?
I think you're right. It's like they're all the same. I've been through them all. I'm now on been on Telus for a year, and it's the same. It's it's amazing how little coverage we actually have in this big country. If you're not in a big city, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's how big and vast we are as a country. It's pretty amazing. Uh, yeah, just simply go up north, and if you're not around a tower, I guess you're screwed. But I guess this whole Starlink that Elon's got going, who knows, maybe that'll speed things up.
Actually, Mike, I live in a smaller town. It's big enough, but we have so many dead spots. But I often think to myself, it's kind of nice that I'm in a small town because maybe I'll never get the 5G. Uh, I don't know enough about 5G, but there is a part of it that does kind of make me nervous. I guess maybe because all the crap we hear about 5G.
Well, it's all the waves, right? Sound waves and all the fucking frequencies we're fucking with, right? Human beings operate on a certain harmonic level as well, too, right? Through the ether, they say. But that's some advanced kind of knowledge that people really have to dive into and look into, right? Power and energy and spirit and everything, right? It's a personal journey, really, for everyone to really go on and find out for themselves, really, because it's not like anyone's given a rule book to this insanity, right? Where we come from, where we're going, what's the purpose, right? Because this insanity of pain and torture is not fun. I've had enough, anyways. So it's time to correct the ship here and hopefully fix things. Here in Canada, we have so much potential. It's just mind blowing the power we could have, not only for our country, but once we regain the actual true power and then spirit of our nation, man, that's gonna blow up wide on this planet, folks. Like, people don't understand the potential here, right? It's endless. It's endless. And, we have so much fruit and so much to offer here in Canada that it's an amazing thing once people really realize what the potential is, I think.
We
Uh,
have
if
on
if
top.
we could only translate this over multi-language as well too, right? That's another thing that keeps us all divided too, is the message that we're all receiving, right?
Amen, Mike. Amen. Like we all hear the message differently, right? Which I think ties into our own personal experience through life. Um, that's a reminder to keep things simple. Like Nadine had made a post, what what can unite us? And it sounds simple, the question, but when I put thought into the answer, I was like, wow, I don't even know what unites us anymore. And I think until we can collectively come to an agreement on what would unite us, like the obvious for me was the first one was freedom. But then, you look at the hashtag freedom. It's like, wow, freedom can't unite us. What can? So my next thought was family. Um, so for me, it's either one of the two, and maybe both combined. Our family and our freedoms to take care of our own family. But if we can't even agree that that's one fundamental thing we can all agree upon to unite us, then we're in trouble. Um, yeah, I don't know. Things are very
Well,
strange nowadays.
it's not necessarily that strange. It's just, yes, it's nice to be enlightened and open-minded and this and that, but when you're attacking the core structures of what being a human being is, right? Be it the gender discussion, male and female, and this transhumanism agenda That's ultimately what's going on, right? They think that the planet is overpopulated. No, we aren't overpopulated. It's just misdirected and disconnected from the source of like Mother Earth and everything, right? That's the true problem that's going on here. And all these pushers, like these they're all flying off around the world here on these all summits and stuff. Like, think of the carbon emissions alone from all those jets. But yet we're the problem? No. What about the extensive corporations that are hauling all the diesel and all the products and everything across the oceans and the big tankers? Those are creating so much pollution. One of those tankers alone equivalates all the vehicles in North America, well, in Canada anyways, for sure. I've seen that study. But all the vehicles in Canada driving, one tanker blows the emissions out of the water, right? So there's many perspectives that people aren't really seeing, right? And we're only seeing small closed captions of what they think is going on. But the bigger picture is there always is a bigger picture, a different perspective, right? And the problem is that they've convinced a lot of people otherwise, and it's just a small minority that really controls this at the end of the day. Look at what we elect our governance under, right? Just a small portion of our population. And there's always a bigger picture. And look at the billions. Like, I can't believe that this is not obvious. How many hundreds of billions of dollars were given to other countries, but yet we give $5 million to relief from like another hurricane here in the Maritimes, right? It's all perspective, and it doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense to a rational thinking human being that when you're gonna try and fund other countries and solve their problems when you have so many problems at your own base, that's not gonna work at all, right? So maybe it's as simple as getting control of the reins and stop the spending, right? The ridiculous spending, because it's totally mismanaged, and it's just becoming more of a money laundering scheme at this point. It's just obvious, right? You're taking massive wealth, directing it to other countries. Meanwhile, your own country, you're only giving nickels and pennies to for all of its infrastructure, whether it be your healthcare system. For 30 plus years, we've had hallway medicine. Why? Justin Trudeau could have just simply printed all this money and solved it just like that. But instead, he prints the money and gives it to other nations. What logic sense does that make, right? So we have a huge problem here in Canada. And it's not only Justin, but it's the government. It's all of them. The House of Commons, all levels of government are so corrupt and intoxicated, under a system that is not for our country, right? It's just siphoning all our resources and all our wealth and even like our human capabilities. Like, we're so ingenious when it comes to solving world problems, but yet we don't actually get it done, right? So huge
Well,
problems and lots to do.
that's the easy thing, isn't it? Fixing other people's problems as opposed to fixing your own. So Trudeau, I just read a post Trudeau put out, or his team put out, that in Indonesia they just committed more money to Ukraine. And it makes you think, like, all that money Trudeau spends around the world, to your point, Mike, if we just would have kept that home and taken care of our own problems, could you imagine where Canada would be right now? It's just, I try and think of it more of a something that makes that's more like tangible and small as opposed to a bigger global problem. So I think about it, I can't help anybody if I'm not helping myself. So before I can help anyone, I have to make sure I'm secure, I'm set up, and I'm stable. Until I do that, I'm not fit to help anyone else. Well, our country should be the same. We should be putting and investing into our country as opposed to be helping everyone else and letting our own country fall apart. To me, when I look at it, it's so obvious to me. It frustrates me that no one else sees it that way. that everyone with these friggin' Ukraine flags are like willing to, yay, yay, yay. Like, yay for what? We're destroying our own country while we're building up a country that's gonna fail in the end anyways. It's not our problem. And I'm not trying to be insensitive, but if we don't set Canada properly, we're in big trouble down the road. And yeah, I'm just kind of ranting here. Thanks for listening. Is my Twitter dead? Or
No,
is
no, you're
everyone
good. You're
still
good.
on?
You're good. No, we just take our moments of silence.
Yeah, no, that's
It
cool.
was well said, man. You're what else is the mic drop, right? Like what else are we like we're at the point to where it's like, we don't even have to scream and yell. We could just simply discuss it and say, hey, let's do it. Let's get the problem solved, right? So
Amen,
it's
Mike.
easier said than done, right?
Well, so I think that'll be my next. I'm going to take the words I put to Trudeau, and I think I'm just going to keep repeating that every time he posts. And in the end, all you want people to do is take a moment to think and maybe question something, and maybe wake them up one day at a time. Got a question for everyone. In the last maybe month, whenever Elon took over Twitter, I get from this moron, Colby something, but he's the guy drives me nuts. But I don't block anyone. But is anyone superhero leftard?
I'm glitching on here there, Zinc. Yeah, Zinc, I'm gonna duck out and come back in, reset my app. Hopefully you could hear me. Yeah, hold the
Yeah,
space
you're
there
fine.
because my approval for speakers isn't working, and yeah,
I don't
I'll be
see
right
any
back.
pending, so.
Yeah, I had two pending. They're no longer in the room though. I have yeah, I had off the pillow. Guess people are getting booted from the room maybe. Maybe I am all right. So give it a try. Yeah, people are gonna get automatically booted from these spaces, of course. They don't like these spaces, of course. I still don't see the post up in the nest though. I do see one by Captain Red Pill though. So I don't have the links quite yet. Maybe share it in our message too. That way I could link it up to everything.
Are we having
Oh, you
technical
shared it down
issues?
below. No, no, I think we're all right. Yeah, we should be good. I shared it up there, so all the links, share them out. We're cross-platforming this as well too, so it should be starting momentarily. Go ahead, roll it whenever it starts there, Zinc.
Yeah, no, the feed's up. If you listen very carefully, you can hear the little shuffling there.
Order à l'autre.
All right, we'll see you at the first break
The
there.
Public Order Emergency
Everyone.
Commission is now in session. La commission sur l'état d'urgence est maintenant ouverte.
Good morning. Bonjour. Okay, I understand we have a new panel of witnesses for this morning. Okay, and who from Commission Council?
Good morning, Commissioner. This morning, we have the first of two RCMP panels, Commissioner Lucky and Deputy Commissioner Duhem, and I would ask if they could come to the panel, and while they are getting themselves seated, I'll just make a preliminary comment to the parties that
Could you just identify yourself for the record,
Thank you.
please?
Gordon Cameron, Commission Counsel. Commissioner, yesterday at the close of the proceeding, a matter was raised by Mr. Miller about the state of documents on the party database. And in light of those comments, Commission Counsel investigated the matter last night. And most of the parties will have received and had a chance to review Commission Counsel's email to them explaining what we've been able to learn about that situation. And so I won't elaborate on that, except to say that two things. We did recognize that there had been a glitch with respect to the uploading of documents, and that was corrected over the weekend. It was unfortunate, but the matter is in hand and the party database is in good form. The other thing we'd like to assure parties, Mr. Commissioner, is that Commission Counsel did have access to all of the documents, and indeed parties will notice that the documents, including those that just went up on the party database over the weekend, some of which are included in our list of documents for the examination of this panel. And so we're prepared to proceed confident that we have had a thorough review of the documents in advance of this panel appearing.
Okay, thank you for that update. And it's appreciated. And again, I'd simply reiterate, if there are issues, please raise them with Commission Counsel as soon as they're noted so that we can address them and resolve them if there's something to be done. So
Thank you.
with that,
If I could
we'll
ask
proceed with the panel.
the panel be sworn.
Deputy Commissioner Duhem, will you swear on a religious document or do you wish to affirm?
I swear. I can swear on a religious document.
We have available the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah.
Bible.
For the record, please state your full name and spell it out.
Full name is Michael Robert Duhame. Duhame is spelled D-U-H-E-M-E.
Do you swear that the evidence to be given by you to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Commissioner Lucky, will you swear on a religious document or do you wish to affirm? For the record, please state your full name and spell it out.
Brenda Marie Lucky, L-U-C-K-I.
Do you swear that the evidence to be given by you to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I swear.
Thank you.
Get back to.
I don't believe her. She's wearing a mask.
Good morning, Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner.
Morning.
Good to see you again, and I'll begin by reminding you that you met with Commission Counsel back on September 7th, and with you were a number of your colleagues, and you were interviewed, and a summary of that interview was prepared that has since been put on the party database and been made available to the parties. For the record, it's WTS 6069. And so I'll ask you some questions about the adoption of that summary on the record, with the qualification that four of the people who were in that interview aren't here today. So I'll just ask you to confirm that the interview summary is accurate to the best of your knowledge. So the way I'll put it is this: that you have reviewed, each of you two have reviewed the summary and confirm that insofar as it contains your information, you believe it to be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief, and that insofar as it contains the information of your colleagues, you understand it to have been reviewed by them for accuracy and confirmed as accurate. Is that true?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, Deputy Commissioner Duhem, we got another chance to talk to you later on October 11th, and there is a separate interview summary of that interview. For the record, that is WTS 6068. And have you reviewed that summary and confirmed that it's accurate?
Yes, I have, and it's accurate.
And do you adopt it as part of your evidence?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, there is a third summary, and this is the summary of the interview of Ms. Ducharme and Ms. Vinette. And for the record, that is WTS 6067. And since they're in your division, Deputy Commissioner Duhamel, I will ask you to confirm that that summary has been reviewed by Ms. Ducharme and Ms. Vinette for accuracy, and that it has been filed with the Commission as part of the RCMP's evidence?
My understanding, it has been reviewed by the two individual.
And it's adopted as part of the RCMP's evidence?
Correct.
Thank you. Now, finally, the RCMP filed an institutional report that has been on the party database for some time as DOJ.IR.6011. And I'm going to ask you to tell us what you can about a recent clarification to the status of that institutional report so that we can make sure the proper version gets adopted as your evidence. Can you help us with that?
Yeah, I can. I don't have the exact page because I was given a copy this morning from council, from DOJ, but it does refer to police agencies and jurisdiction. And my understanding is that Commission Council had requested this information, and we did, when we went through the validation process, is what was written in there is a standing operating procedure that was not in force at that unit at the time. So we just wanted to clarify that.
And so the institutional report that is about to be, or perhaps already is updated, in any event will soon be updated to the party database, will have that correction made in it?
I'm assuming so, yeah.
Yes. And so if I can put it this way, can you prospectively adopt that corrected institutional report as the evidence of the RCMP before?
Based on the copy I was given, yes.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Commissioner, for the benefit of parties who may be concerned about a last-minute correction, I can confirm, and I think Deputy Commissioner, I'll ask you to confirm, this is a relatively minor correction to the currency of a version of a document cited in the IR that has in fact been updated, and that updated version will be reflected in the as-filed version, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. With that administrivia out of the way, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner, I'll ask you some overview questions just to get you to introduce yourselves to the Commissioner and to the parties. And so I'll I'll begin by asking you, Commissioner Lucki, to just describe your role within the RCMP, and just so that you don't need to tell us the whole of that, perhaps you could concentrate in particular on your role as it pertained to the convoy and protest events that are the subject of this inquiry.
Thank you. Generally, my role as commissioner is to oversee the operations and administration of the RCMP. In relation to the convoys, obviously we had convoys across the country, so I was getting operational updates in our jurisdiction. When it came to the specific convoy or the protests in Ottawa, there was a few roles I had. One was I was liaising with Chief Slowly on a couple of occasions, relaying resource asks that we received. If I was in receipt of those resource asks, I would pass that down through our command structure. I was also, one of the major responsibilities was to get the information from across the country and to brief the deputy minister community, the ministers. There was 4 ministers that I would brief, and then halfway through, the Prime Minister called incident response group, where I would brief situational reports from across the country of anything that was happening related to the convoy. generally speaking, I had to make sure that in our police of jurisdiction, that our divisions had the resources, ensuring that they had the resources, the equipment that they needed to deal with those incidents.
And with respect to your observation that you were briefing ministers, would that have included Minister Mendicino and Blair and also presumably the National Security Intelligence Advisor?
Yes, and I believe it also included Minister Alghabra, the Minister of Transport, as well as the Minister of Governmental Affairs, Minister LeBlanc.
And you also participated in regular briefings with PCO, PMO, and Justice, Intergovernmental Affairs briefings where those departments would have been represented?
Mostly at the deputy minister level, we would have discussions. I am not sure who all was there, but it was mostly at the deputy minister level, the representation of the same ministers, the DMs of the same ministers I mentioned before.
And in particular, you participated, to that point, Commissioner Lucky, you participated in the Deputy Ministers Committee on Operational Conditions, the DMOC?
Yes, we normally have those meetings, and we sort of morphed it into convoy briefings as well.
And judging from the minutes of the meetings of the SSE and the IRG, you were in attendance at those meetings as well?
Yes, I was.
And you mentioned that you liaised with then Chief Slowly and presumably later on with Deputy Chief Bell. Were you also in regular contact with the Commissioner of the OPP, Mr. Creek?
Yes, I was.
Thanks. And Deputy Commissioner Duhem, could you describe your role in the RCMP generally and as it had particular application to the convoy and similar events?
Yep, I'm responsible for federal policing. Federal policing program within the RCMP has about 5,000 people assigned to the program. Our mandate is to investigate national security, such as foreign actor interference, terrorism, ideologically motivated violent extremists. We also investigate transnational serious and organized crime. We are also responsible at the border between the ports of entry. And we also have a protective policing mandate, which ensures protection to certain incoming dignitaries, or the Prime Minister, Chief Justice, the Governor General, and others that are appointed by the Minister. And we also have our intelligence and international policing that reports into federal policing. So my role on the convoy from the onset, really, we were looking at it through a lens of protective policing. That was our core mandate when it all started. As the resources ask started, and as this grew, the commissioner appointed me to be the point person for the organization to coordinate the assistance that we're providing to OPS throughout. I was part of the goal command structure when it was formed. My responsibility throughout from the beginning was to ensure that the commissioner had the right information to brief up at the various briefings at the DM level, at the ministerial level, at the ERGs, and the coordination of resources from across the country that needed to be brought in. I had a team looking after that. So really the assistance to the OPS and support of resources, regardless of the skill set, was under my responsibility.
Thank you. We're going to come back in a few minutes to the federal policing responsibility of the RCMP. But you mentioned an expression in there that might come up later in our discussion. It has been mentioned before in various contexts. I think you might have called it the gold command structure, but I think the expression is the gold, silver, bronze command structure. Could you just describe how that works for the RCMP and how, in some of the contexts, it came to bear on the management of the convoy?
Yeah, the gold, silver, bronze structure, and it's well explained in the report. But basically, the gold structure is really providing a strategic direction to manage the operation. The bronze is really the people who would look at planning the event, and then when you get to the silver, is actually the people who are actioning the plan that's being done. Pardon me?
Reverse, gold, silver, bronze.
Gold, silver, sorry, yeah. Silver are actually preparing the strategy that was dictated by the Gold Command. And as it trickles down to the bronze are really the feet, the boots on the ground, the SMEs that actually action the plan.
Okay, and that command structure, as I understand it, there wasn't just one applicable to all of the RCMP. That might be implemented in particular jurisdictions or indeed to deal with particular situations or incidents. Am I right there?
That's correct.
So you might, for example, for Coots or for a province, have a gold, silver, bronze structure implemented to deal with events in those locations.
Correct. The one in Ottawa was specific to dealing with the one in Ottawa.
Thank you. Now coming to the RCMP federal policing mandate, this is the first, just to help you answer the question in context, the first of a series of questions I have to try to describe what the RCMP does with all of those 5,000 personnel in Ottawa compared to what it does with the personnel it has in the provinces where it is police of jurisdiction under contract to the provincial governments. So with that overall picture in mind, federal policing in Ottawa, you mentioned some of the areas it covers, but with respect to the convoy, your particular concentration was on the RCMP's protective policing mandate. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I just want to correct this. When I mentioned 5,000 people, it's not 5,000 in Ottawa. 5,000 federal police employees across the country and posted internationally as well. Well, not just uniquely in Ottawa.
I see. I'll come back to a distinction there, but how many are in Ottawa, roughly speaking?
National division is composed of about 700 people. And then when you add the component national headquarters, probably around, I'm throwing a guess here, 1,200.
That'll do for these purposes. Now, could you expand a bit on the RCMP's protective mandate, as it's sometimes called, the protective services that the RCMP offers in the city of Ottawa or the National Capital Region?
Yeah, the protective mandate for the RCMP derives from the RCMP regulations. We are mandated to protect on a threat risk assessment base the Prime Minister, the Governor General, the Chief of the Supreme Court, visiting dignitaries, presidents from other countries it would fall under our responsibility, or any other appointed official by the Minister of Public Safety. We also have, within that protective, we also have an intel unit that feeds in to to better prepare our posture and respond to any incidents. Here in Ottawa, we are looking at about 400 people that are assigned full-time. And when I say 400, it's all categories of employees assigned to protective policing.
And if you can describe it, we might come to some particulars as it relates to specific incidents, but generally speaking, what was the impact of the arrival in Ottawa of the convoy? What was the impact of that on the protective mandate of the RCMP?
Well, one of the things, and I forgot to mention, the people that we protect is also elected officials that fall under responsibility. So it was bringing a coordination and ensuring the secure transport of the elected official to Parliament on the Monday 31st, I believe, was it 31st, to it, coordinating routes to get into the area. There was also concerns with demos that would creep up at Rideau Hall or at the Prime Minister's residence, which required us to mobilize additional resources to make sure that we had the right posture to address any incidents that would occur during the arrival of the convoy or while they were there.
Okay, well, that's a helpful example. So if you expected to encounter protest activity, as part of escorting and ensuring the safety of the Prime Minister or one of the other people for whom you're responsible, and you encountered this protest activity, sort of, if I can put it this way, in the way of your, the path that you expected to take, your protective policing mandate, would that include dealing with those protesters on a public order management basis? Or would it deal with getting your protectees where they need to go safely?
In this instance, our POUs were not dispatched to clear the roads or to assist in any ways. We were working with the Ottawa Police Service to ensure what were the egress and ingress with regards to Parliament Hill. Without, obviously, with the dynamic and the fluidity of what was going on downtown, a lot of the routes could not be guaranteed, so that's something that we had to factor in and had to shift our plans as we went forward.
Okay, again, at the risk of belaboring the point, I just want to make sure I understand correctly. The impact on your protective policing mandate wasn't that you had a public order mission to clear the routes. It was just that your mandate was more complicated because you had to coordinate with the OPS and make sure your routes were safe.
Coordinate, but also with the elevated, the intelligence that we had, the increased resources that were required to ensure the protection of the different sites that we are responsible for.
Thank you. Now, another part of your police work, I'll put it this way, because I'm not sure how it would fall into these mandates, certainly your federal mandate, was to collect intelligence as the convoy was approaching. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, and Commissioner, this is the point where I would footnote, so to speak, the witness summary that I referenced at the very beginning, because the Commission Council did do an interview and filed the interview summary of Ms. Ducharme and Ms. Vignette, specifically on this point of the RCMP's collection of intelligence in relation to the convoy. So we'll just ask this panel a few questions about this. You did have an intelligence team analyzing the information available as the convoy was approaching, correct?
Yes, we did.
Can you just give a quick overview of who those people were?
Yeah, there's several structures in place when it came to intel within the organization. So we had an ideologically motivated criminal intelligence team that were looking at it more from a national scope as to what was going on and providing strategic threat advisory bulletins. I think there's 8 in total that went out throughout the legal protests. And we also had our protective intelligence unit that was really gathering intelligence to help us with our protective posture, but it doesn't neglect the fact that the information gathered under the PIU unit would be shared with other agencies. And eventually, early on, I think it was on the 28th or the 29th, pardon me, we did create what is known as a combined intelligence group that would bring together people from different law enforcement organizations within the Ottawa area, such as you'd have OPS, OPP, Sûreté du Québec, Service de police de Gatineau, that would be present, and that's meant to bring to a hub together so that everybody can share the information that they have, because it's not just the RCMP working on a block of information. Every organization is working on the information, and it's coordinated through that combined intelligence group. As this grew and there's more and more increased resources being brought in, we stood up at the national headquarters, we stood up another combined group really to coordinate the intel from a national perspective so that we could prepare the commissioner with a picture of what's going on across the country. I'll factor that into, you've heard the Hendon report several times. That was a report from the OPP that was also used to help the SIG, the Combined Intelligence Group, in the analysis of all the intel that's coming in. So there's several players involved when you look at a combined intelligence unit or group.
And where was the combined intelligence group working?
I believe it's out of the NCRCC, National Capital Region Command Center, that was located. It's located in Orleans. which is located in Orleans.
Thank you. Now, Commissioner Lucky, this is probably something that's best directed to you, because what I'd like to do now is ask you to describe quite a different role that the RCMP performs in the provinces other than Ontario, Quebec, and perhaps Newfoundland, but the role of police of jurisdiction in the provinces and some of the municipalities of those provinces. Can you give us an overview of that?
Yeah, this falls under our contract and Indigenous policing business line, and it is the policing that we do in all provinces and territories except Ontario and Quebec. It represents about 70% of our workforce, and they're contracts with provinces, municipalities, and some Indigenous communities. The contracts are held by Public Safety Canada, and we provide the policing service under those contracts in those provinces. We don't do policing in the entire province. Why I say that is usually in big municipalities. For example, in Alberta, you have your Calgary Municipal Police, you have your Edmonton Municipal Police, and then generally speaking, the RCMP, there's a few smaller ones like Lethbridge, but generally speaking, we police the rest of the province, except for some of the bigger municipalities who have their own independent police agency.
Let me ask if I can, if you can draw a comparison for those of us who are more familiar with the policing situation in Ontario and Quebec, where we have a provincial police force, which is sometimes also the municipal police force, but sometimes the cities have their own police forces. Do I understand correctly that in the provinces other than Ontario and Quebec, that would be the RCMP, you would be the provincial police force, and in some cases, the police force of the municipalities that don't have their own police force?
Yes, very similar to what the OPP or Sûreté Québec are.
Right, so functionally speaking, again, this sounds Ontario and Quebec centric, but the RCMP is the OPP or the Sûreté de Québec in all of the provinces except Ontario and Quebec.
Yes.
And that is arranged by a contract with each of the provinces, correct?
No, not necessarily. We have 194 contracts, 169 contracts. Some, in the case of BC, for example, the province has the contract and they sort of subcontract. But in places like Alberta, they have a provincial contract and then they have municipal contracts. Any municipality over a certain population will go into a municipal contract and it changes the funding formula, as well as there are certain Indigenous communities where there's a different funding formula.
Now, when you two have left the stand, we're going to have Deputy Commissioner Zablocki here to describe the situation in Alberta in particular. But before he gets up to describe that situation, perhaps Commissioner Lucky, you could describe the way in which the contracts you have with the provinces, either a single contract or multiple, as you just described, allow you to move resources within a province to areas where they are needed, or between provinces when there are higher demands in one province than another.
Yeah, this is the beauty of our model, in the sense that under the provincial policing service agreements that we have, we can move resources. It's called an Article 9. So in the case of Alberta, Commanding Officer Zablocki can move resources from within Alberta as he wishes, just advising the province of that if we're doing any big movements of resources. And then again, under a different subsection of Article 9, we can request up to 10% of resources in any other province. And so what we do is we normally, if it's urgent matter, we move the resources and then ask for permission later, because we'll never compromise the safety of Canadians. But generally speaking, when we know big events are coming on, we will prepare those letters in advance. The letters go from myself to the minister to the applicable policing jurisdictions. And it's always based on a cost recovery.
Right? Which is to say, if one province borrows a bunch of your officers from another, there's a financial arrangement to compensate for that.
Yes, and that's exactly what ended up happening in Alberta during these convoys. We do also have access to federal resources, like Deputy Commissioner Duhem was saying, across the country. Those don't fall under those agreements. They're federal resources.
Right. Now, let me ask you, are there advantages from an operational point of view if you are bringing in officers from, say, British Columbia to Alberta, or from northern Alberta down to southern Alberta, et cetera, in having officers with the same equipment and the same training and the same command structure and whatnot? Does that offer you an advantage that you might not have been able to achieve, for example, when you were coming in to assist in Ontario?
Absolutely, because we have the same, more or less, training standards and service standards across the RCMP, and that flexibility allows for, especially in extended events where you'll have multiple, you have to provide relief, and you can't sustain things like the forest fire in Fort McMurray, the manhunt in Manitoba. You can bring those resources in seamlessly because they have the same level of training and the same equipment.
Thank you. Now, moving a bit closer to home, at least insofar as it pertains to the events in Ottawa, I would like to ask, and these are probably questions for you, Deputy Commissioner Duhem, but not necessarily, so please feel free, Commissioner Nucky, if you are the better person to answer, to talk about the role of the RCMP in Ottawa. We've heard about their federal policing role and their protective services mandate, but I'd like to take you back a bit in history and ask you if you can, well, let's start way back, so to speak. Has the RCMP, at least in our living memory, ever been the city police, the police of jurisdiction in Ottawa?
Not as far as I can recall.
Okay. But there was a time that you've outlined in your summary, your witness interview summary, when there was a more substantial contingent of what you might call uniformed officers on the ground in Ottawa. Can you explain when that was and what the purpose of those forces were?
Yeah, and that's correct, that the RCMP did have a larger footprint in the Ottawa region in the year 2000s, leading up to 2014, after the attacks on Parliament Hill. There was a review that was done, and I should just say that prior to that, the organization, the RCMP, was responsible for the security of Parliament Hill, outside component of House of Commons and Senate, not the interior. The interior was managed by House of Commons, had their own security, Senate had their own, and the RCMP was responsible for the outside grounds. At that time also that we had more resources when it came to our protective policing mandate. We had more clients to protect at the time. And then over years, there's a different approach on the way we did business that reduced our footprint when it came to protective policing, as well as patrols at the embassies. Back to our responsibility on the Hill, we had in excess of 120 people there that were assigned to the Hill on a permanent basis to ensure the security. When the attacks occurred, there was a review done of the entire security posture on the Hill, and that's when a new legislation was created to create the Parliamentary Protective Service, who the RCMP was responsible leading the integration of security of the different units that were there. What we saw after a year and a half being there, it was decided to put a plan forward that, realizing that the job that's being performed on Parliament Hill was not a policing function, but more a security function. There's a transition that was done with PPS, with the accord of the both speakers, to reduce the footprint of the RCMP. Currently, legislatively, the only position that requires an RCMP member is a position of director. So when you talk about shift in resources and footprint, there's a significant one that happened recently. Protective policing, when it came to our clients, happened before that. So if I may, when you look at the dynamics prior to this change, the RCMP, when it was responsible for the Hill, looked after all the planning of the different events that took place on the Hill. This is prior to the creation of PPS. And we would work jointly with Ottawa Police Service. Being a demo that's going through the streets of Ottawa and would land on Parliament Hill, then it's shifted over from OPS to us. And we work jointly on that in regards with the plans, the preparation to respond to any of demos that are going on the Hill. When PPS came into to effect, I was the first director. And what we were looking at is the PPS becomes distinct and basically not separate from the RCMP, because the RCMP still had a role to play, but must be distinct. So the planning was now done from PPS, this is 2015. Every event that was on the Hill was being done from PPS and not necessarily the RCMP. We assisted at the beginning, but now they're completely autonomous when they're planning for events on the Hill.
And in your witness summary, some of the questions that Commission Counsel asked had you explaining that this perception that the RCMP and the OPS should be working jointly to manage large events in Ottawa hasn't entirely dissipated from the minds of the people at Ottawa and the OPS. Can you just give us a description of that situation as you see it now?
So we still work jointly with the OPS. I can give you an example of any event that would occur on Parliament Hill. PPS would have the lead for planning the event on the Hill, but you would also have OPS would be responsible for whatever's in the street. And we'd be involved from a protective lens as to what's going on. Will there be any road closures? Will there be, what's the impact on our mandate? But it'd still be a lead role from PPS, but organizations will come together.
And would that also be true for other events, perhaps elsewhere in Ottawa, where your protective policing mandate would be affected? We talked about how in the convoy, you needed to move people around the city, elected officials and whatnot. But would that also be true if there were some other event independent of the convoy today that your protective services people would liaise with the Ottawa City Police?
Definitely. Any significant event in Ottawa, I mentioned earlier the National Capital Region Command Center, that's a coordination hub where we have various partners at the table to understand the dynamics that are going on a daily basis or even hourly. And then sometimes it allows us, it allows emergency personnel such as fire departments, paramedics, to adjust their response according to the intelligence that comes into this hub. But on a day-to-day basis, yes, there's liaison going on with OPS, with the Ottawa Police Service, but it's more there's liaison going on, but less of a reliance to rely on OPS on a daily basis. But it's only when events are in the area, that's when we come together in CRCC and make sure that everybody's informed so that we can properly plan. Everyone can properly plan.
Okay, now moving to the period immediately prior to the convoy, what did you expect, and I'm saying you, Deputy Commissioner Duran, but perhaps Commissioner Lucky, you also had a view on this, but what did you expect this event to be?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I was looking at it purely from the lens of our mandate when it comes to protective policing. How is this going to impact the people that we're mandated to protect? Does PPS need any assistance as this move forward? So it was really through a lens of not a demo, but really how is it going to impact us on our service delivery when it comes to protective? Early discussions I had with OPS on the matter, there seems to be no concerns whatsoever, good relationships with the organizers, and there's no need for us to question the relationship they had with them. And we felt comfortable, well, I felt comfortable that the Ottawa Police Service had things well in hand, negotiating with the organizers and having a discussion on how this would unfold in downtown Ottawa.
if I just cast back to the point about intelligence that was being collected by your IMSIT and other people in conjunction with the convoy, your forces in Ottawa, including the intelligence people, would have been aware of the Project Hendon and similar intelligence that was being shared among intelligence agencies with respect to the size and scope and possible intentions of this convoy, correct?
Yep. Yes.
And despite your having had access to all that intelligence, you still viewed this as an event that the Ottawa Police appeared to have under control and didn't cause you any particular concern other than the extra attention you would have to pay to your protective mandate.
That's correct, and there was no additional ask for resources as they were planning up when the convoy was going to arrive in Ottawa. So I was of the feeling that they had everything under control, and as I said, if there's no request for resources, I know in incidents, situations like this, that the organization on the intel side come together to share that information. But I didn't have any concerns because I was of the opinion that they had everything in hand.
Thank you. There is a fair bit of material that's come before the commission already, and a lot of it is set out in your institutional report and your the summary of your interviews. So I won't rehash it all, but I do want to spend some time on the question of the requests by the OPS for assistance and resources to be provided by the RCMP. I'll begin by just asking you to describe, this is probably for you, Commissioner Lucky, the logistical challenges and perhaps administrative challenges that the RCMP faces when it, well, I suppose some of these apply even when you're moving within provinces that you have contracts with, but in all events, the logistical challenges that you had when attempting to mobilize resources to assist in Ottawa or otherwise in Ontario.
Well, first and foremost, in the requests, they weren't requests for plainclothes officers, which is what we primarily do within Quebec and Ontario. Obviously, they're police officers, so they have uniforms. They don't work in those uniforms each and every day. So when we make requests for the federal resources in a uniform capacity, that's changing their role, their primary role. Within the two provinces, it's a lot easier than outside of the provinces, only because we have control of the federal resources, but also because they can drive into Ottawa, but they don't come in a big chunk. So when we need additional resources, we fan that out from Deputy Commissioner Duham's shop to the commanding officer of Ontario and Quebec, requesting additional resources, and then they do their what they need to do to get those resources. And they will come individually or, driving, however they get there. When we're doing the same thing nationally, of course, we have to request under the PPSA, the Article 9. And then we get into way more logistics in the sense of flying them out. Are there going to be vehicles available? What kind of shifting are they going to do? What types of resources do you need? Because especially in the contract policing environment, we have a multitude of different types of resources within the uniform capacity. So we need to know what kind of resources and how long they'll be gone, because when we take resources out of the contract side of the house, they have to be backfilled somewhere else because policing goes on. So we have to make sure that all of those logistics are done at that level.
Can I add to that? An important factor that we have to remember is that requesting resources, be it from Quebec or Ontario, the RCMP still has a mandate to fulfill in those provinces. And mobilizing resources, you have to find the resources. We have ongoing investigations that we cannot stop. So it's finding that right balance of how many resources can we release to make sure we keep the lights on to ensure that we are still on mandate on what we're doing in the respective provinces. So it's not just, it's easy to say we need 50 additional people, but then we have to look at who's releasable in those divisions based on the functions or the responsibilities that they have right now. So,
thanks. Yeah, there is a lot on the record and about how many resources were available when. Can either of you give us the basic facts of how many RCMP resources were available from the beginning to the end of this and approximately when they were made available? I'm going to leave it to other parties to drill down on that, but just if we can have a big picture of what resources the RCMP committed to the events in Ottawa.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
Commissioner.
In a general sense, any requests that we got from Ottawa Police Service, we had fulfilled. And in the beginning, it was between 30 and 50, for example. And when that was the first weekend, and as the time went by, the resources started to increase. So we had not only increase of frontline resources, but increasing at the NCRCC. When we got into a unified command, there was people behind the scenes. Those numbers were increasing. And at one point, I think we got up to, what was it?
The total number at the end, and the total numbers, we had in excess of 1,100 people. 1,100 people, employees dedicated to either the Ottawa Police Service assistance or our protective mandate. And I can break it down even more in the sense that a little over 650 police officers to assist the Ottawa Police Service and close to 210 to assist us in our protective mandate. So that's a significant lift. I know there's been a lot of numbers circling around from 30. Why didn't we respond to 50? There's also that 250 that was raised. The 250, I just want to clarify that. It wasn't 250 dedicated to OPS, Ottawa Police Service. It was a mix-up. We tallied up everybody that was sworn in, and some of the people that were sworn in was actually in support of the protective mandate, not necessarily supporting OPS, but still available if they were required.
And
Deputy, if you could slow down in your testimony as much as possible for the translators, because you tend to speed up. I know you want to get out of here and get back to work, but
I will add as well, we had also provided resources to Windsor. So we diverted some resources for the Windsor blockade.
Thanks. We're going to come back to Windsor, though if I don't offer you the chance to say more about that, please volunteer it at an appropriate point. But with respect to what you said, I sense there's a bit of a glossing over from the initial 50 to the ultimate 650. We all know that there ended up being a very substantial commitment by the RCMP and the OPP towards the very end when enforcement action was imminent. But can you tell me, roughly speaking, what the curve looked like in the first sort of 14 or 15 days before the implementation of the enforcement plan started to become imminent?
I would say generally it started at around 30, and then it continued up in the 200s. It got up to about 200 throughout that timeline. And then, of course, when we were gearing up towards the actual enforcement in that last week, the numbers grew exponentially. And that's when we went outside of up till then, the resources were drawn from Ontario and Quebec primarily. And it was in those last week where we were drawing resources from across Canada.
That's exactly the information I was looking for. Thank you. On that point, there was a fair bit of controversy both between RCMP and the City of Ottawa and the OPS about just how many RCMP officers were available. You've acknowledged some confusion about whether they were available as boots on the ground to be deployed by the OPS versus people you were bringing in to assist in your protective mandate. But can you explain why there was that difficulty of communication between the RCMP and Ottawa or the OPS about just what resources you were allocating to deal with the situation in Ottawa?
Well, I'll start and then I'll pass it over to Deputy Commissioner Duham. But part of the confusion came out of the fact that we were swearing in a bunch of officers that may in fact be used but weren't being used. That were in the vicinity. So we made sure, like Deputy Commissioner Duham said, we swore in some of the people under protective in case they were brought over to assist in OPS. So their numbers, even they were swearing in certain numbers, those numbers might have not all been deployed at that time of the swearing in. Also, the fact that there was requests and some of it was, there was confusions over, is it so many per shift or is it a total number? But from the tactical or from the, the bronze level of our command that we were talking about, we were advised that any of the requests that they had for frontline, when I talk about frontline resources, we fulfilled those requests. And I think there was a confusion between what the mayor may have been reporting and what the chief may have been reporting, but we were advised at the tactical level that anytime they needed resources, because that's where they get into what kind of resource, where are they going to be placed, what shift are they going to be working, that was all done at their level. We didn't get the intimate details of that, but we were advised that any of the requests that they were getting through the command center, that they were fulfilling.
No, that's accurate.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clerk, perhaps I could ask you to pull up on the screen ssm.can.408433. And if I've got the number right, that should be the letter of February 7th from Councillor Deans and Mayor Watson to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Public Safety. And you're familiar with this letter, Commissioner Lucky? Or perhaps not the letter, but the substance of...
Substance, yes.
Okay. And I ask this in particular reference to your comment that all of the requests by the Ottawa City or the OPS had been responded to positively by the RCMP, and yet, one might say, we have this letter, I would say, going from about as official as Ottawa can get to about as official as the City of Ottawa can get to as official as the federal government can get, in which there is a very specific request for certain categories of police officers, a total of 1,800. And Mr. Clerk, yes, if you just, that's right. Thank you, right there. And yet, this is February 7th, and that's why I asked you the timescale. You acknowledged to me that the substantial 600-odd figure of RCMP boots on the ground, so to speak, did not get to Ottawa until much after this, and yet at this same time you were assuring Parliament that all of the requests by the OPS had been met. And so the question for you is, how do you reconcile your statements with this letter?
What was the date of the letter?
The letter is February 7th.
7th. Yeah. At that point, when there was a request for 1,800 resources, and obviously I was in consultation with the OPP commissioner, and it tells what kind of officers, but it wasn't, is it 1,800 RCMP? Is it, because there was still the OPP who were responsible for securing resources from all the various municipalities. We were under the impression that it was 1,800 between all of us. And what did that mean? Who was going to provide what resource? And when we get into these high numbers, that's when we have to ask, okay, what is the plan? Where's your plan? How are you going to rotate these resources? What kind of resources specifically? And it sort of talks about that, but 100 civilian staff, what does that mean? There's all kinds of duties under civilian staff. The public order officers, 600, we don't have, to have 600 public order officers. The OPP was actually responsible for the prioritizing of public order officers within the province of Ontario during that time. Did that mean they were going to provide the public order? We were going to provide frontline. So until we saw what the plan was, because the minute we draw outside of Ontario and Quebec, we have responsibilities to our contracts. We have to know when we draw them out, how long are they going to be gone? When are they going to be replaced? How are they going to get there? What are the logistics? Is there equipment that they can't bring with them that they need when they land, like certain vehicles or command centers, if in the case of public order? If they are going to drive their command post, then they need lead time. So there's lots of things to consider. A general request like this, it sort of in a way caught us off guard because we didn't have those discussions with Chief Slowly up to that time. There was talk about increasing the resources for enforcement, but we didn't get into any specifics until this letter came out.
Yes, if the paragraph that begins, "We ask the Government of Canada and the Province of Ontario to work with us to secure this combined officer surge," is that what you mean when you didn't know which force were being asked for?
Yes, because it wasn't, even though it was to the federal minister who is in charge of, who oversees the RCMP as part of his portfolio, we didn't assume that we were being asked for 1,800. So did it mean that 3/4 of those resources would come from Ontario and 300 or 600 would come from RCMP? We needed to see a plan. So this is from politician to politician, but we needed to translate that into operational plan. So we wanted to see what the plan was and what kind of resources specifically they needed, with what skill set and with what equipment.
On a related question, during your interview, Commissioner Luckey, you described what you believed to be the appropriate sequence by which the Ottawa Police Service should seek assistance when it was beyond its own capacity, and that in particular it should go to the Ontario provincial police first, or at least the Ontario government, and ask for assistance, which presumably would be provided by the OPP. And you referenced the provisions of the Ontario Police Services Act as indicating the path for this to take place. But was it your impression that provision of the Ontario Police Services Act obliged Ottawa to go to Ontario either first or only to get assistance, policing assistance?
No, I'll be honest, I didn't know the nuances of the Ontario Police Act until this convoy, because we don't fall under the Ontario Police Act. So when like I said, at the beginning, we just provided resources directly to Ottawa Police Service. They didn't go through the OPP. This was, assistance to a neighboring police service, and we provided that. And even subsequent requests wasn't going through that. But when it got to this number, that's when the OPP commissioner explained to me the process, which I wasn't aware of, that such requests should go through the OPP, and then the OPP would exhaust all avenues within the province of Ontario, and if required, would come to outside, they can go to like another municipality like Edmonton City Police or a different police services, or they can go to the RCMP. And it wasn't until we got that big ask that I was getting more information about the Ontario Police Act.
And that information came to you from Commissioner Creek?
Yes.
Thank you. I want to talk to you now about the role that the federal government, and I'll put in that category for now, both senior officials and politicians, what role they played in your decisions to allocate resources to Ottawa, or as it might be Windsor, but locations outside where you are police of jurisdiction. And in particular, if I could ask you to go back to the beginning and remind us for a minute who it is you report to and who it is gives you guidance or input on matters such as the events in Ontario.
Well, first and foremost, any of the deployment of resources is the government or the minister has nothing to do with that. This is operational decisions, and we make those operational decisions based on our availability of resources, our ability to deploy such resources. If in fact, like, obviously this was the last example you gave, this was a letter from the mayor to the minister. He would pass the letter on to us and say, here's a request. And he would never say, fulfill this request. He would say, see what, here's a request, deal with it, what you can do, depending on the numbers, because we may not have the numbers available to be able to do that. And that's why we were surprised, because it never usually goes to that level. It usually just goes, from police service to police service. If they require assistance, it would come through our police service. We would fulfill it as best as we can. Because in this particular convoy, our goal was to assist Ottawa Police Service as much as we could, so that they could be successful in putting an end to the protest. As far as any of the operational decisions, the government isn't involved with that, and it's just more of an information where we provided, we're providing additional resources to Ottawa Police Service. Those were included in situational reports to the minister and the prime minister.
So, if you can remind us just for a second, who would you have been interacting with to the extent the federal government was either inquiring about or expressing an interest in the situation in Ottawa?
Well, obviously the Deputy Minister of Public Safety, Rob Stewart, would have been sort of the interlocutor between the minister and myself at times. But when we were doing 3 briefings a day, one was at the Deputy Minister level, one was at the minister level, and after, I think, February 10th or so, was at the Prime Minister level. So there was lots of briefings on the situation, the movement of resources, if it included RCMP, because that's the ones that I would report on. But generally speaking, we didn't talk about numbers of resources specifically with the ministry.
Let me ask the clerk to pull up PB NSC CAN 408043. And just so that we can understand the timestamps of these, as I understand it, these are about 5 hours ahead of time because they're in Greenwich Mean Time. So this conversation, which begins a timestamp at 5:59, would have been taking place at about 12:59 or about 1 o'clock that day. Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't think anything turns on that for this particular discussion, but it might later on in the other teams' chats that we look at. Mr. Clerk, can you scroll down to page 3? And the line I'm looking for is a statement by Flynn to the effect of, when the AG starts talking like this, there we are. Can you first tell us who Mark Flynn is?
Mark Flynn is he's the second in charge of federal policing. I don't know his official title.
Yeah, Mark Flynn's Assistant Commissioner responsible for National Security Program as well as our Protective Policing Program.
And can you, either of you, recall what discussion was being, usually these team discussions are a discussion among RCMP personnel at the time some other meeting is going on, is that correct?
Yes, because often, normally we'd be in a room and they'd be in the room with me. I'd bring people to assist with the information because there's often questions that I wouldn't know the answers, so I'd have my team. But when it was like, for instance, on the weekends, often people would be at home, so we would just create a Teams meeting.
Right. And this February 5th Teams chat is observing a discussion in which we see a reference to the Attorney General talking. So this is an observation about a cabinet or SSE meeting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you understand what Mark Flynn meant when he said, I say this because you would have been listening to the conversation that he's listening to when he makes this comment, when the AG talks like this, we better get our own plan going. And your response looks like you were trying to thumb out Lametti.
Well, because I think up top it says, who is this speaking? And because I'm a slow typer, I probably,
I see.
and a bad typer, obviously.
So what did you understand Mark Flynn to be saying when the AG talks like this, we better get our own plan going?
Probably at the time, I would know what he was talking about. Now, fast forward, I can't connect the dots at all. We had, like I said, there was so many meetings going on, 3 or 4, sometimes 5 a day during this time. And if you had asked me at the point in time, I could probably give you a lengthy explanation, but I have no idea.
Can you join me in the inference that just by what Mark Flynn said, that the Attorney General has said something to the effect that the RCMP might have to take some action?
No, when I look at that, there's a lot of things I think that it could be possibilities. It could be the fact they could be talking about our protective mandate and making sure that our plan is going. I honestly, I wish I could help you with this. I have no idea what the reference was to this.
Okay, well, it doesn't look like I can take it further than that. Let me try another one. Mr. Clerk, can you call up OPP 404583? And on page 3 of that, and we're going to have to figure out who's who in this text exchange. But first of all, Commissioner Lucky, can you confirm that this is a text exchange between you and Commissioner Karik of the OPP?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And I don't know whether to ask you, Clerk, to scroll up or down, but there we are. The blue, I believe, is you, Ms. Lucky. Is that
yes.
correct? Okay. And in the middle there, you say this: between you and I only, GOC, and by that you would have meant the Government of Canada?
Yes.
The Government of Canada losing/lost confidence in OPS. We got to get to safe action/enforcement. Can you tell me what you meant when you said that?
Well, generally speaking, I mentioned it earlier, is our goal, and especially from my point of view, was how can we help Ottawa Police Service succeed in this occupation of downtown? And so now we're into the second weekend. Of course, there's not much we can do during that weekend because the numbers have grown exponentially. So I think, first of all, when they first came on the very first weekend, people assumed that they would, the convoy would come into town, they had an agenda, they'd follow their agenda, and then they would leave. And when that didn't happen, and we got into the second weekend, we didn't, from my point of view, we weren't expecting that, for them to stay that long. And now it's, they're creating infrastructure, they're disabling vehicles, so now they're there for which appears to be a longer term. So instead of reducing the footprint, which is always our goal in protest, to reduce the footprint so that if you do go into enforcement action, you can do it the safest way possible with the least amount of resources, it was increasing exponentially. So of course, people were losing confidence in the OPS's ability to deal with the situation.
Now, I'm going to leave to others the more particular comments in your the summary of your interview about the leadership of Chief Slowly and the specific operations, the Ottawa Police Service. But on this point, you talk about the Government of Canada losing confidence in the Ottawa Police Service. What was it in your interactions with the officials and politicians of the Government of Canada that prompted you to have that view?
Well, we always got the same question each and every day. When is this going to end? How is it going to end? And we really couldn't answer that. And of course, early on, we weren't intimately involved with what was going on. So there obviously could have been negotiations with the protesters, the leaders of the protest groups. But people from the outside looking in weren't seeing any decrease in the activity. They were seeing the opposite. They were seeing increase in activity from the protest groups and more people getting involved, especially on the weekends. So of course, people were wondering if there was ever going to be an end to this because they hadn't seen any outwardly enforcement action. So in a way, it wasn't a completely, if I could use the word, educated point of view, because nobody knew the nuances of what was going on tactically from OPS. It was just a comment from the outside looking in.
Okay, I've tried twice to get you to describe what it was made you believe that the Government of Canada had lost confidence, and I think twice you've told me why one observing the situation might have lost confidence. So if I can bring you back to that and ask you if you had some inputs that made you believe the Government of Canada had lost confidence in the OPS.
Well, we had at deputy ministers' meetings, nobody said out loud that, I don't recall people saying, you know what, we're losing confidence. It was my observation by the various comments about how come this is still going on? When is this going to end? How come it's getting bigger? So I was inferring from those comments, when is Ottawa Police Service going to do some enforcement? When are they going to deal with this situation? I could hear the impatience, I could hear the frustration, and from that, I inferred that they were losing confidence in Ottawa Police Service.
Thank you for that.
Sorry.
Now, if I can take you down, sorry, not down, but further on in that text, you say we got to get safe action/enforcement. Can you decrypt that for us?
So that's all about, let's help them get a plan together so that we can help them with safe enforcement. So again, when having experience in public order, it's all about minimizing the footprints. You won't do that on those weekends. As we all saw, the numbers grew exponentially. So obviously any enforcement action should be generally speaking, between the Monday and the Friday where the footprint was minimal. And so helping them get to a place, because we knew that the numbers were too big, even with a minimized footprint, for them to handle it themselves. And they already mentioned that they needed assistance from the various police agencies. So how can we help them do that is what I was referring to.
And then the last text here, first of all, the reference in there to the Emergency Measures Act, in retrospect, am I correct in guessing you meant the Emergencies Act?
Yeah, I would imagine.
Right, okay. So, because if they go to the Emergency Measures Act, you and is I, and okay, thumbs are not working with perfect agility here. You or I may be brought in to lead, not something I want. So a concern you had was that and this is February 5th, and you're contemplating the possibility of the invocation of emergency legislation. If they go to the Emergency Measures Act, you or I may be brought in to lead. So that was a scenario you thought was a possible outcome of invocation of the Emergencies Act, was that either the OPP or the RCMP would be put in charge, so to speak, of the Ottawa situation.
Yes, very early on when they talked about Emergencies Act, I had no idea what exactly that meant. And there was talk about, well, what happens if Ottawa Police Service cannot enforce or have the ability to deal with the situation? And there was talk about, do you change leadership? Do you change police? it was all in general conversation, nothing specific. And really, it was from a place of problem solving. Everything was put on the table, and it was, so that was one of the things that came up, whether or not that could actually happen. That's when I started learning more about the Ontario Police Act, where if they started to go through the process of the Ontario Police Act, they would in fact be the OPP that would be next in line to assist. And so it was just, all it was sort of, we need to help Ottawa Police Services best we can, so that Tom Carrick and I had lots of conversations about helping Peter succeed through this unprecedented event, and doing what we can to, through resourcing, through equipment, through advice, any which way we could to help them get through this situation.
Thank you. And if I could ask clerk to bring up PB NSC CAN 408042. And scroll down to page 2. If I've got the right document, there should be a comment by Whalen. What is his objective? There we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now we can see from the extract above that you were a participant in this Teams chat. Again, can I take it correctly that you are in a Teams chat monitoring, I think at this stage, in an SSE meeting? Yeah. Yes. And do you understand what Alison Whalen meant by what is his objective beyond getting us to take over?
Can you scroll up a bit?
Mr. Clerk, could you give Commissioner Lucky the context there?
The Ontario Zone. Agree. I'm imagining, again, I'm speculating because there was a lot going on. I don't know who he is in this reference, but obviously it's somebody talking I'm imagining one of the ministers or somebody in that meeting about what are the next steps if, in fact, OPS needs further assistance. I'm not exactly sure what it means, what she means by that, but I'm just wondering if there was any, she's asking, is there any other options besides us taking over?
Well, let me ask you more directly then, rather than through what we have to agree are difficult decipherings of long ago choppy text messages. But were you having discussions with senior officials or your minister about the possibility of the RCMP actually taking over policing in Ottawa?
Yeah, I think there was a misconception because people automatically assume the RCMP being the federal police agency, that's what our responsibility was. So there was a bit of education on that in us saying, of course, when people were looking at solutions, one of the solutions was, well, why doesn't the RCMP take over? We got asked that quite often, and we'd say, well, we're not the police of jurisdiction. We don't have jurisdiction in the province of Ontario. There's a lot of other layers before coming to, you would never come to the RCMP. That's not our role. But I think there was an assumption because we're the federal policing or national policing agency in Canada, there was an assumption that that's what that meant. And so we were trying to educate deputy ministers and ministers that, our role is not to overtake any police agency. We're here to assist in any way we can.
And were you getting input from senior officials or your minister or other ministers for that matter to the effect of what more can you do? Can't you do more? Couldn't you be in there? Statements like that?
Oh, there was things like, what do you need? Do you need any more resources? Is there any equipment you need? Is there anything we can help you with that would help Ottawa succeed in this event? Because I was the touch point for all police agencies. So whether it was Windsor, Coutts, the Lower Mainland. It was always, whenever any big event happens, I always get the same questions. Do you have everything you need? Is there anything you don't have that you need? Please come to us. And so I get those same questions.
Right. The question to you, do you have everything you need, is, I think, substantively different than, are you doing everything you can, or can't you do more, or, you know, we've got a terrible problem in Ottawa, why aren't you in there helping to solve it? Were you getting input like that?
Well, we were, again, when they were talking about us potentially, and it wasn't very lengthy conversations about us potentially taking over, there'd be snippets of that would come out, and we'd have to correct that, saying that wasn't our role. But obviously, it was all hands on deck on the solution, problem solving. So people were asking, you know, is there anything else that you could do to assist that you're not doing? Is there, how can we, again, when is it going to end? How is it going to end? Do you need anything else, anything to help make it end? Those were questions that were getting asked quite often.
But did you get a sense that the senior officials or the politicians, understandably concerned about the situation in Ottawa, were asking you what you could do, not what resources you needed, but what you could do to solve the problem in Ottawa?
Not specifically in those terms, but they've asked us, are you giving, you know, are you able to give them the resources that they're asking for? That was one big question, because between the mayor and the minister, there was lots of talk about resources. And we were explaining that a lot, as you mentioned earlier, the confusion over the numbers. And we told them we were giving them everything they needed. And when they're ready to enforce, if they require additional resources over an enforcement plan, we'll be ready to assist. But there was nothing specific like how you mentioned.
And I'll ask this question generally. Did you ever get a sense in the input you had, either from the senior officials, your deputy minister or others, or the ministers, your minister or others, that pressure was being put on you, that you, I think you'll understand that if I put it this way, that crossed the line in terms of the propriety of officials and politicians giving you direction about how Ottawa should be policed?
Absolutely not. There was a lot of, I didn't feel the pressure from our point of view because we weren't the police of jurisdiction, but I did feel the pressure internally because we wanted to do everything we could to help Ottawa Police Service. But as far as from the politicians providing direction or pressure, there was, in general, wanting to find an end solution to this. Of course, within our own organization, when especially on the gold, silver, bronze, when they all came together, everybody was rolling up their sleeves trying to figure out, how are we going to end this? And how are we going to deal with this? So we were putting a lot of pressure on ourselves from an organizational point of view. And I would say that the politicians felt the same pressure of wanting this to end. And of course, they're, like you said, they're asking, are we doing everything we can to help them? And our answer would be the same. They're leading it. It would be, and often I'd say it'd be like Chief Slowly going to Edmonton City Police and telling them, what to do. There's jurisdiction, and there's jurisdiction for a reason. And they, despite even at the final days of enforcement, Ottawa Police Service had the lead in that. And that was very, very important, that there always has to be somebody who's taking the lead, and it's the police of jurisdiction.
Coming back to this point about, I think it might have been you, but somebody used the expression, the line between church and state, which, whether that's what you meant in the context, we've all assumed means the line between the political side and the policing side, and all of the both jurisprudence and analysis that's been done on where that line should stand. So my question to you is, where does the RCMP look for guidance on where that line is? And I'm just going to insert parenthetically, we've had a lot of information about how the Ottawa Police Service has, between it and the City Council, the Ottawa Police Services Board, and the same will be true of other police of jurisdiction in various places. we don't see the same between you, the RCMP, and either the senior officials or the politicians. So where does the RCMP look to help find that line between what we're calling church and state?
Well, for me, it's pretty clear. Anything operational, we're advising what's happening, but we're not taking direction on how to do things. And we've never been provided direction on what we should do. And it was actually interesting, I think, in one of the meetings, because normally when I brief generally speaking, the Minister of Public Safety, and sometimes now that they've split, the Minister of Emergency Preparedness. In this case, there was additional ministers. And so I think it was maybe the first IRG or maybe even the first minister meeting where I believe it was Minister Menachino advising these ministers that you are not to provide direction to the commissioner. They remind themselves. My ministers don't need to remind themselves because we deal with them on a daily basis or regular basis. But with the new ministers, there was even just a reminder, because sometimes what happens is when you're into problem solving can sometimes translate into, we should do this and we should do that, and could we do this and could we do that? And sometimes that people might feel that that's direction. I don't consider any of that direction. Direction to me is something that you specifically would turn to me and say, Commissioner, we need you to do this, or don't do this. That's direction, that's interference. We don't get any of that. It's strictly exchange of information for the most part.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there some institution or body, though,
No.
that stands between you and your minister, the way that one might analogize to the Ottawa Police Services Board standing between City Council and the Ottawa Police Service?
No, we don't have a police commission. We've just brought in in the last couple of years, a management advisory board.
So, sorry, repeat that. I missed that.
In the last couple of years, we just brought in what we call a management advisory board, but they are there to provide advice to the commissioner. They do not. They're not the filter between us and government.
Right. And so if your minister or a minister were to cross that line, it's simply a function of you having to say, you're over the line, minister, or otherwise defend your own jurisdiction, so to speak. There's no institution that protects you from that. Everybody is just expected to follow the rules, or you call them out.
Yeah, there's no institution in between the two of us, but we definitely have our policies and our procedures and our direction. And under the RCMP Act, I am in charge of the operational command of the RCMP. I can get ministerial directives from the minister, but it's in regards to administrative matters. But I won't get anything. For example, if I was to get a ministerial directive, I'm just hypothetically speaking, that I felt crossed over in the operational domain, I would bring it to my legal advisors and say, is this crossing over? So I'm just trying to, as I'm talking, I'm trying to think of somebody that would act as that. And the only people I can think of is probably legal advisors that may, in fact, if I felt that happening. But I've never had to, in meetings, I've never had to really, tell everybody to stop and you're crossing the line. Because they're very cognizant of it and they're very protective of it, because we have similar countries in the Five Eyes that are struggling with this, and they actually come to us and ask how we do it. But it's basically from previous testimony at the Mass Casualty Commission. Because I've been asked this question several times, I think it's time that we put something to writing that outlines what you can and cannot do from both the commissioner's perspective and the politicians, especially from a rotational point of view. There's a lot of different, politicians change so that they are understanding, because we're not the only operational entity in the federal government. There's corrections, there's border services. So I think it's time to clarify it because it's been a topic of conversation.
I'm glad you went there because that was the next question I had, because the provincial and municipal police forces have already run into problems with this. Those problems have generated commissions of inquiry that have made recommendations and given some guidance, and perhaps this commission will add to that body of material. But how would you envision this further or better guidance? And you might have noticed that Deputy Minister Stewart made the same observation yesterday, that there was room for development on this point. But how would you envision that? What would it be contained in? Some policy guidance document? And is there work on this now?
Well, actually, I think one of the members of parliament has put in a private member's bill on that very subject and said it won't be difficult to do because there's many police agencies who have examples of what needs to be put in text to make this happen, because it's already out there. And the name is escaping me, but there is a private member's bill to discuss this very issue.
Thank you. And to be clear, I heard you say that this wasn't an issue with respect to the convoy or the blockade, but it is a topic you believe should be addressed. Is that fair?
Well, absolutely, because in the last 6 months, I've had to respond to it on several occasions. And so my hope is that my replacement won't have to. So we need to clear this up.
Thank you. I want to come back on a particular point of interest that has attracted some attention already before the commission, and that has to do with, well, perhaps I could ask Mr. Clerk for you to call up WTS 6068. And if you can get to page 10 of that. Yeah, no, you had it there. And I recognize that handwriting.
Not mine.
Deputy Commissioner, this question is for you, because am I correct in identifying that as an extract from your notes?
That's correct.
And perhaps you could first read, for those of us who haven't learned to decipher your handwriting, read the 2 asterisk points that are in your notes there.
Yeah, the first one is Peter referring to the Chief Slowly from Ottawa Police Service, said he's going to ask double of what he needs. And the second asterisk is planners from our shop, integrated planning cell, what resources are required, because we were talking at that point, have an integrated planning cell. What type of expertise do we have to bring? And these notes stem from, on a page before that, I believe it was Steve Bell that was briefing us, providing an update, and that's a comment that was shared by Steve Bell.
Okay, I was just going to take you to that. If you look in the typed text below your written note, you describe roughly what you just said, that the note reflects a call with Deputy Chief Steve Bell of the OPS concerning the OPS's request for resources. This is your note of what Deputy Chief Bell told you?
Exactly.
And if
if I could have the page before that, because I don't have my notes, but I'm quite certain it reflects a call with Chief Steve Bell. It's written down below, yeah.
I can pull up your notes if you want.
No,
but
that's okay.
I can confirm for you that is what you have indicated earlier.
No, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yep.
And if you can help us with this, and you're not the first one to speak to this statement or comment, what did you understand Deputy Chief Bell to be meaning when he said well, first of all, Peter Slowly, is that correct?
That's correct.
He's going to ask double of what he needs. Can you explain at least what you understood Deputy Chief Bell to be saying?
So the way I interpret it, the numbers that were provided publicly and through the letter that went to the minister, the 1,800 asked, is that really reflective of the needs? Because again, I go back to what the commissioner said earlier, throughout this process, there was no plan to support or to demonstrate to the organization what skill sets and resources are required to support an operational plan and to support Ottawa Police Service. So I took it when this was briefed to me the first time, the 1,800 police officers, 1,000 police officers, 600 public order teams, 100 support staff. I took it that, is that what they're asking? Considering that Deputy Chief Steve Bell says he's asking the double what he needs. So I wasn't sure if that was an ask, and it was starting to sound like a broken record where without a plan, both us and the OPP were kind of struggling as to what types of resources do you actually need to assist in addressing the issue in Ottawa.
And I understand that an integrated planning cell, which we've sometimes heard called the IPC, was established by the RCMP and the OPP on about February 8th. Is that your recollection?
Around that date where we brought the SMEs, the subject matter experts together to start reviewing what they had and start building a plan.
And as I understand it, the purpose of the IPC was, among other things, to review such planning as had been done to date and to further develop the plan to deal with the situation in Ottawa. Is that right?
That's correct.
Did that effort, that is the establishment of the integrated planning cell, allow you and presumably the OPP, but allow the participants in the planning cell to put a finer point on the resources that would be required to deal with the situation in Ottawa?
That was one of the objectives, is to nail down what was required for Ottawa.
Right. I'll ask this question in an open-ended way. Do you feel that the February 8th timeframe by which that integrated planning cell was established, do you feel that the situation in Ottawa could have been handled more effectively if that integrated planning cell was established earlier in the process?
It wouldn't merely be speculation on my part how it could have been handled if this was put together sooner. Could it have come to an end sooner? Perhaps, but I'm not in a position to say that it would, considering everything that was going on. So,
fair enough.
And the other thing to factor in is it's one thing to look at the plan, but again, I go back to what I mentioned earlier. When it comes time to mobilize resources from across the country, it's not only challenging, but sometimes resources don't get in the next day. It takes a couple of days before you get there. So,
If I could also add, not being intimately familiar with what OPS was doing, they could very well have been in negotiations with protesters. And we always say in public order, if you're in protests, if you are in negotiations with the leaders or various people in these protests, while you're still having the conversation, you're not going to go into enforcement. So not knowing that, we could only speculate that they could go into enforcement when they might, in fact, be in the midst of negotiating a peaceful resolution.
So did you view the integrated planning cell as strictly an enforcement a mechanism to organize enforcement?
No, because part of that, when you're dealing with protests, you have taskings going to your police liaison teams who are dealing with the leaders of the protest group. From what I understand, it was a little bit more problematic because generally speaking, you have one leader. In this case, there were several leaders. So obviously it makes the task a little bit more difficult when you're dealing with quite a few different people. But it's all about having those conversations about how to find a peaceful way to get an illegal blockade back to a peaceful protest.
Thank you. And we'll come back to that very point, but just so I understand correctly, what you're saying is you don't mobilize your public order units right away when there's still a viable option of a liaison solution to the situation?
Not necessarily. It depends on the dynamics, because if you are negotiating and there's problems where public safety is at risk, you may in fact you may be in negotiation and still have your public order teams staged at a location. So you still may need them just in case in the event. Every protest is different.
I'd like to move on to another topic now, and for that purpose, Mr. Clerk, could you call up OPP 50151, and the topic here is not everybody monitors these proceedings as closely as some of us do, but what we're calling the engagement proposal. I think you're familiar with that, I think at least from our interview with you, Commissioner Lucky. Yes. So I just want to ask you some questions about your involvement in this, and maybe I'll just throw it out to you to describe how you first learned about this possibility, what your involvement was with Deputy Minister Stewart and connecting him to Marcel Baudin, et cetera. So if you can just begin at the beginning and tell us what you can about that.
So there was conversations about the protest groups wanting to talk to an official, like a politician or an official of some sort, and nobody was sure if it was at the provincial, municipal, or federal level at that point. And so I believe that Deputy Minister Rob Stewart was tasked with looking into the possibility of having an official speak with the protesters. And he wanted to know how that works with the liaison teams and how they what they're doing as far as negotiations with the protesters. Because we weren't involved with all of that, I reached out to Tom Carrick, and Tom Carrick advised me that it was, in fact, the OPP police liaison team that was leading the negotiations with the protesters. And so I asked if I could connect the lead, who the lead was of that team, and if I could connect them with Deputy Minister Rob Stewart so he could get more information. And really, my role was as a facilitator, and I introduced the two of them so they could talk. Later on, he was coming up with this protest engagement strategy. I think he asked what we thought of it. I sent it back to my team who deals with liaising. We have a different structure, but same idea, but different structure. I gave it to them to say, is there any red flags on these documents, or is there any advice we can provide Deputy Minister Stewart? I think we provided him a bit of advice on that. I think as well, I included asking Inspector Baudin what he thought of what I had said, but then I'd already realized that he had reviewed the document, I think. So it was just a matter of connecting Deputy Minister Stewart with Inspector Baudin on this protest engagement strategy as one of his tasks.
Now, we did hear from Deputy Minister Stewart about the evolution and ultimate demise of this proposal, but in terms of your observation of it from its conception through to the end, did you hear it discussed among either officials or at the IRG? Did you have input on it to the IRG as to whether you thought it was a viable proposal?
Not me specifically. It was Deputy Minister Stewart who was leading that, and any thoughts I had on it, I would have provided to him.
Thank you. if I can switch gears here a bit on,
Is this a good time for the
actually,
morning break?
Mr. Commissioner, this would be a very good time to break, yes.
Okay, so we'll take the morning break for 15 minutes.
The commission is in recess for 15 minutes. La commission est levée pour 15 minutes.
There we have it, folks. Wow, what a morning. Wow, if no one has anything to say about that, I'll be surprised. Good morning, Walpog. Good morning, everyone. If everyone could share out the space as well, get more ears on this, the better for all of us, I think. Good morning, everyone. Feel free to grab a mic. This is the same Brenda, was it Lucky or Licky, whatever, that was involved with the whole Nova Scotia event too, so. You know, what I highlighted there is, look at how powerful they are. No, if Canadians really stood up, there's no stopping us. And that's their true fear, right? So, I don't know, a lot of deflection from the RCMP to all the levels. You have to understand all the levels and how the dynamics work here in Canadian law as well, right? So, morning, Walk. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, good. Hey, does anybody have, if there's anybody in there that wants to be part of marking down these time codes for us, because I'm marking all kinds of stuff. It's crazy. Some of the comments that were made by her, indicate incompetence. I couldn't figure out at first what was going on with her audio because I was like, she sounds mumbly. And then of course I went to the video and realized that she's virtue signaling. She's doing the mask thing, so that's interesting. And I wouldn't be surprised if every government official that comes on there, like I'm looking forward to listen to the PM mumble his way through it. But if anybody wants to get involved in time coding this shit, just send me a DM and we can, if you got time or availability to do that. This stuff is crazy. What I'm picking up here, like I've already made, I don't know, maybe 10 time codes here. Very interesting sort of, I don't know if you want to call them ass coverings or if you just want to call it just pure ass doesn't seem to know what they're doing. I'll just go quickly through my time codes here. The reasoning of why they needed to do this thing. She inferred this. This is sort of infuriating to me. You can't infer stuff. Like if you don't know what your role is in Canada, which seems to be clearly that she has some grasp of it, but I think she has the same grasp that I do. To get paid that much to be the head of the RCMP, like unacceptable. Then she admitted she didn't know what the EMA Act was, which is fairly shocking. I think a lot of us knew what the EMA Act was. Maybe not a lot of us prior to that, but it definitely was coming into play at that point. And then she goes on to say that she did not know how the RCMP could help the Ottawa Police Service. What the hell do you mean you don't know how she could help? Well, I mean, is that just trying to ass cover, or well then how come you don't know? So what happened there? She goes on to say that there was no direction coming from the PMO or from cabinet, that she was never told what to do. She was only going along with what I can't remember how she phrased it, but it was definitely a prepped statement where it's like, oh, they never said anything. She just worded it so perfectly. So there's definitely some coaching going on there. And then she goes, they don't give us direction, but we give them technical advice, which I think is a little bit bullshitty because we already see in their text messages. I'm really proud of the lawyer here. He seems fairly impartial, but he kind of fleshed out a lot of bullshit. and then the last thing that she said there just before we went to break, don't use the RCMP if you're in talks with the leaders of the convoy, which she said they didn't know, but we now know that they were in talks. So there you go. It seems like everybody's slow motionally throwing everyone else underneath the bus, including the government. The government's doing it themselves, so it's not just the convoy leaders that are doing that. So yeah, lots of good little nuggets there, but if anybody's got time to mark this time code shit, DM me. Is there any reason why I can't retweet the room through the comment box? I have to quote tweet. Does anyone know why that may be going on?
No, I'm not sure either. I have the same scenario here, so.
And you got me correctly with my mic here, Mike, or is it super low and robot-y?
No, you're good. You're good. You're rocking and rolling, brother.
All right. Sun just came over the mountain here. I'm getting all stoked. Okay, very good. I'm actually excited for this day. Normally I'm not this excited, but I think we're really getting into some nuggets here of
Well, when we're talking about the RCMP, this is like the head of our, like, one below national security here, well, if not in charge of it, right? So damn rights they better have their ducks lined up and be in charge. And by the sounds of it, they don't even have the forces or the management to really handle what they are facing.
well, it's like there's some slight understanding of what's going on when it comes to covering her ass. When it comes to everything else, she's sort of pleading ignorance, but it's like, one begs the question. I mean, what was her background prior to this? And then we know that she has, like, she's married to, like, Bill Blair's cousin or some shit like this. I don't know what the thing is there. Someone's already dug it up, but I mean, was this just a nepotism appointment? Like, what is her background that makes her sort of, and a lot of these functionaries that are in charge of this stuff don't necessarily have a policing background or whatever, but to me, it begs the question, like, someone should have been coming up through the ranks here and understanding what the hell is going on, and this does not seem to be that.
Well, even watch the catchphrases like legal protest or illegal. Like, are you kidding me? A protest is a protest. People have a grievance. They wanted the grievance to be addressed. And the length and stay of a protest is all nonsense talk, too. Assumption, all this stuff, right? They're trying to slip everyone up. When, fact of the matter is, when anyone has a protest, you get it addressed by the opposing, who you're protesting against. And if there's no address, well, then you're going to continue to protest. And you can call it an occupation, whatever, but the length of the stay is determined on the communication of the involvement, other than the oppression, which has happened over time and time again. They smack us down and everyone runs away, which was very psychologically harmful on Canadians, right? No Canadian citizen ever expected horses to be trampled or gassed or whatever, or any of the forces of RCMP officer or whatever. All those officers, no particular group, right? Very traumatizing, especially for Canadians. But at the end of the day, it was illegal for them to smack people down against all of our charter rights and freedoms. Good morning, Habs.
Good morning, guys. I agree to what both of you are saying. Hey, Walk, to answer your question, because for the why you're not able to retweet it, because the room is being under the Four Amigos. So even when you're quoting it, you have to actually change it to the public to see. So for the rest of your followers to follow or to see it.
Smarty pants. There you go. Hab's got the answer. So what I was going to say about what Mikey just said is she's being very clear to say it was a legal protest. She's covering her ass that way, and then she goes back onto it on a different tack of, like, how we were. So it's like it's that forked tongue again, right? We're getting, it's like she's sort of acknowledging it was a protest. They're calling the other one a blockade. But the reality is, and she knows it. And the other thing is that the government should know it. When they tried to call in the military, and of course the head of the military's, they have a lawyer that's like basically the guy has to figure out if it's legal for us to go to war, or peacekeepers and all this other stuff. He sent the letter back saying absolutely not, we will not get involved here. Why does the government think that they can use the military against fucking people? I mean, is it just a psyop question? Is that why they just sort of floated it out into the air? uh, who knows? But again, people should know what the rights and how this system was designed with these checks and balances, and that's why we got to be really careful about just how much they erode with whatever laws and budgets they're trying to pass. Like, we have to go through this stuff with a fine-tooth comb, make sure they're not doing little devious little reductions and things, and change these little core beliefs of Canadians, right? And I think what we're seeing here is the crumbling of the Canadian identity in real time, um, by this captured elite class, or whatever political class. Anybody wants a mic down there, grab one. I mean, this I don't know how long this recess thing goes for, but
Well, this first break's only 15 minutes, so it's a short hiatus. Maybe people just want peace of mind. I don't know. Yeah, a lot of powerful voices are in the room, so yeah, feel free, grab a mic.
where's TR6 with his boomer vitriol when we need him?
I'm wondering where that fourth amigo's been hiding. I'll have to send him a DM. Let him know remind him he's still an amigo, even if he's angry as hell and he doesn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, I think he's probably pissed off in Mexico. I have a feeling he's working his magical plans to get somewhere warm.
I was thinking that the other day, just like escaping to some like white desert, freaking anywhere is really away from this insanity, really, because Canada, it's only happening in Canada, this reality, right? Other places around the world, the shit's not happening. So just to get out of this kind of reality for a little while would be a little therapeutic, I think. Or you could just simply run to the woods here, right? So, although a nice, warm, tropical place away from this white stuff. Although we don't have any here yet, but I'm feeling for you, everyone who has snow in Canada.
Well, you just need to keep talking because sometimes when you talk, I just want to respond, and that's why I grabbed the mic. So can you start talking again? I'm just kidding.
Circumcision.
There you go. Oh no, I remember what I was gonna say. I keep thinking about this. If I wanted to, like, if there was anything I would want to defeat in Canada, it is the MAID Act. And I think I had this great idea. This is totally different than the commission, but not really. Like when you have somebody who's like, well, I don't want to be homeless, so I guess I'll take the free death of the government. This is like the situation a lot of people are in. So I think we should have, how people are like really love virtue signaling, like having like rescue dogs. So these are dogs that normally they would have been like in older days, they would have just been like, okay, if you're in the pound for this many hours, then, we're gonna have to put you out of your misery. And this is like, so I would just think maybe we could have like an association called like the Rescue Human Association for people that like, if anybody is not a little bit worried about the fact that because we're a country that isn't providing affordable housing, we're giving free death as the other solution. Like there's certain things that just like, I mean, yes,
Well,
mess,
no,
but
even well, what terrifies me about this act, they could deem people with, opposite views as mentally ill and just write them off altogether, right? So
100%,
this is
and
a
they've done
very
this before.
scary situation, right?
Yes, it is.
And very scary for humanity itself, right? To drive humanity to the point to where they've given up hope and all will to live and just be a part of a society to say, what the heck, kill me off? Is this what really Canada has become?
So can't we like form like, you know how like Project Veritas goes in? Like I can tell you right now that I know that the College of Doctors, at least in Ontario, they require all of their doctors to offer this. So like imagine being at your worst place. Like just like how many of you haven't had a day where you wanted to die? I mean, I've had a day I wanted to die. And at that moment, a sweet voice gets to tell me, like, well, there is another way. You don't have to suffer. But I guess what I'm saying is that we should have teams that like expose from the inside and like capture these things and like rescue people from this because this is all out war on the Canadian people. First, we're gonna make all of housing completely um, unaffordable for people, and especially if they have mental illness after being shut down, like locked in and isolated for 2 years. Then we're gonna offer death as the solution. Like anyway, I think this is something that we should be really, if we're gonna like be very direct about which line of which line of an attack you get. Sorry, sure. Um, you know, this is one of those things. Like if we as a country, like this is on us. Like if we don't take care of our own, they are going to death. So I feel like in different ways, I think before people talked about, having as your, like a lot of the elderly, I'll tell you right now, in all the northern communities, especially Indian reservations, like where I grew up, they get taken away on a medical taxi and they're 8 hours away from any family and they die alone. So I just feel like we should, you know, this is a very practical and real thing that we can put action towards as we watch our world decline. Like it's crazy to me. Yeah, thanks for allowing me to just get that off my chest. I appreciate it.
No, it's been bothering me too ever since I heard that report the other day of a homeless individual. He's being pushed out of society, right? He's being pushed out onto the street because he can't afford to live, and he'd rather die instead, right? He's signing up for a death sentence instead, and that's so sad that we've come to this point, right? You know, uh, the biological family of humanity is insane, right? I've only lived with a half-blood sister all my life, so I'm totally in tune with the whole biological level of not being connected and whatever. I had to at 6 years old on Christmas Day. I was told about my stepsister. I wasn't part of my family, right? For a 6-year-old to fucking realize that and fathom that, you have to do and build things to survive. I knew before that the world was kind of messed up anyways, just I don't know why. But but I made everyone my family. Every human being, every mother, my mother, every father, my father, every brother, my brother, every sister, my sister, right? That's true humanity. Doesn't matter the color of our skin, the language we talk, whatever that divides us all. That what really makes us unique, really, other than the hate and the divisive stuff, right? you know, and it's the only way. It's the only choice we have. You know, now they've split up the family unit at home, and and Canadian families, you know, there's the divide in it. So we all have to be a new family, a true Canadian family, right? And within that, we're protected with our charter rights and freedoms, right? We have to redesign and refabricate from the insanity. We have no choice. It's either we do it and make change for the better, or we just wither away and let the darkness overwhelm everything, right? So this is the last stand. This is our Alamo for a real change here in Canada. And it's up to each and every one of us to translate this same message across all of our languages across this country too, right? Because we're not having a solid base on what we're truly standing for, all of us together as Canada, as Canadian citizens. We're being divided by this and that, right? Meanwhile, we're protected by our fundamental charter rights
Order
and
allowed.
freedoms from all of the things that divide us. So yeah, we'll continue on with the conversation.
The commission has reconvened. The commission reprend.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner, we understand from the records, we can call them up if it's helpful to you, but that on or about February 13th, you got a sense that the plan that your integrated planning cell and Chief Slowly had been working on had come to a state of fruition or maturity. Is that about the right timing, February 13th?
Yeah, that was when it was completed.
And again, we've heard some evidence about this from the other police agencies, but just for your perspective on it, this was a team effort, so to speak, by planning experts, subject matter experts from the RCMP, the OPP, and the Ottawa Police Service.
Yes.
And as I understand it, you in particular, Commissioner Lucky, and perhaps the rest of your team who looked at it were generally satisfied with the plan as an operational plan to deal with the situation in Ottawa?
Yes, both myself and Commissioner Carrique were briefed on the plan the Friday before that. Like I think it was around February 11th. We got an actual briefing from the planners on the plan. And yeah, we were satisfied with the plan.
And would it be correct to say that on your observation of the plan, it was developed in reliance exclusively on your existing legislative and common law authorities?
Yes, but they also did take into consideration, because around the same time the Ontario had put in their Emergencies Act, so there was talk about how that would affect the plan or not. And going forward, there was talk of the Emergencies Act, which nobody really knew what that meant, and just that a recognition that if, in fact, any other legislation or authorities came through, we'd have to adjust the plan, but it wasn't taken into effect in the planning of it.
But thank you for drawing out, I'll say carving out the Ontario Emergency Plan. But if I can be more refined then with my question, the plan, as you understand it, and Commissioner Creek understood it, was drafted without any reliance on any of the powers that might be available to the enforcement forces from federal emergency legislation.
Yes.
And did any of your subject matter experts involved in the integrated planning cell, that is the RCMP experts on that team, express any concern to you that the plan was deficient because of gaps in existing authorities?
Not at that time, no.
Now, we're now going to move into a time period that ends up being densely packed with meetings and activities and the development by you and your team of key messages and everything. This is the 12th, 13th, and 14th, the days leading up to the invocation of the Act. And I understand that on February 13th, you, Commissioner Lucky, attended, I'm going to insert parenthetically there, when we say attended a meeting, sometimes this would be virtual, sometimes it would be physical, or was it always virtual?
Both, depending on the deputy minister. The minister's meetings were generally virtual. Many of the IRGs were in person.
Thank you. And on February 13th, if I can refresh your memory, there was a DMOC at around noon and a briefing with Minister Mendicino and Blair at about 1 p.m., an IRG at about 4, and a cabinet meeting at about 8:30. Is that right?
Yes.
And the subject matter of all of these meetings was the convoy and blockade situation across the country. Is that right?
Yes.
We have a number of your key message documents that you developed for presentation or delivery to these meetings. And I'll just give you the sort of big question we're trying to get some elucidation on here, and then we'll break it down in as many parts as you think would be helpful in you remembering what went on in those probably very densely packed days. But the question we're trying to get to is how much of your key messages got delivered to the DMOC and the IRG and cabinet, because we've tried to follow the sequence of events, and we do this forensically by watching your team's chats and trying to figure out, as you folks are watching the meetings going on, whether you ever got a chance to speak at a given meeting or whether your points were ever discussed, et cetera. So rather than me trying to recreate that whole forensic analysis as to what happened on the 13th, to your efforts to educate the IRG and cabinet on your views about these events, maybe I can just put it over to you and say, if you remember those days, the development of those key messages and how, if, when you were able to deliver them in those various forums.
Pretty well, I don't want to say 100%, but pretty close at the beginning of each of those meetings after they brought up the agenda. I would be generally the first person they would go to, and I'd give that situational overview and literally be reading those key messages. So most all of the information that were in those key messages were delivered. There might have been some exceptions, but very minor nature.
Let's call up the key messages document to see if we can see what it is you were hoping to, and as you just described it, in some cases able to communicate. And this would be SSM CAN NSC 402906. Now, we've seen several, I don't know if they're drafts or variations of this. Do you know if different documents were used in different contexts or if they are just drafts of a single document?
Sometimes what happened would be a very similar document was delivered at the minister's briefing, and then there might have been slight amendments because the situation changed, but that would be the only reason why it would change. But generally speaking, the at DMOC, the minister's meeting, and the IRGs were very similar messaging.
And if we could just scroll down, and as we're looking at this, Commissioner Lucky, is this something that you would read from or jump through? How did your presentation tend to go?
I'd read through it. I would read through it.
Thank you.
Yes.
And you would use, was there PowerPoint or was this piece of paper distributed among those who are in attendance?
No,
So these were just your speaking notes, so
my
to speak?
speaking notes, yes.
Thank you. You mentioned that you would be among the first to speak at these meetings. Were you in effect Cabinet and the IRG's window into the law enforcement situation for the purposes of those bodies' understandings of the convoy and the blockades?
Yeah, I was representing, for the most part, all law enforcement. So we would gather up the information from the various protests, whether it didn't matter which police was the jurisdiction. I would report on behalf of police, which is often what happens when there's a national event.
Right. So to the extent that the OPS or the OPP have information about the status of the protester blockades in their various mandates, that came to Cabinet or the IRG or the DMOC through you?
Yes.
If you look, if we scroll down the page to the heading Additional Supports, it's, I think, page 6 of this document. Now, can you explain what this section of your speaking notes is about?
Well, it's in reference to discussions on the implications of the Emergency Act. And that's where I'd mentioned earlier about being consulted as to whether any of the authorities that they may provide us we would be able to enforce if there was any challenges to that enforcement, and was it doable, so to speak, from a law enforcement perspective. We were also consulted on potential authorities, and so we created a little list of what we thought would be potential authorities early on. And in here, you see there's a few examples of additional tools that would be useful.
Now, did you consult other police agencies in the course of compiling this list of possible other authorities?
At that point, I don't believe so. I think we did consult internally within the RCMP, where like BC is, BC, Alberta, and Manitoba especially, because that's where some of the protests were in our area. I don't believe I don't believe we reached out to all of the other agencies, like all other police agencies. I don't think, because of possibly we weren't to reach out outside of the RCMP on this, because it was part of Cabinet.
So there might have been obligations of confidence that prevented you from consulting outside the RCMP?
Yeah, I'm guessing. I don't know specifically, but I don't believe that we reached out to other police agencies. But there could have been talk at the planning level, like through the National Capital Region Command Center or the Integrated Command Center. They may have spoke about it, but you would have to ask Deputy Commissioner Mike Duhem, because I wasn't involved in that command structure.
Over to you.
Yeah, to my knowledge, sir, there was no consultation. One, because of the confidence aspect, because they're drafting, they're looking at putting measures into the act. And the other thing I'd like to highlight is we had a very short turnaround time to get these recommendations, or what we thought would be useful for law enforcement. So it was as I recall, that it was done strictly internally of the RCMP.
And can we scroll down further, Mr. Clerk, in this document? It's the paragraph that begins that said, the one that's up there, and I'll read it, and you can read it with me, and then I'll ask you some questions. These are your notes and presumably what you said to the IRG and Cabinet on the relevant occasions. That said, I am of the view that we have not yet exhausted all available tools that are already available through the existing legislation. There are instances where charges could be laid under existing authorities for various criminal code offenses occurring right now in the context of the protest. The Ontario Provincial Emergencies Act, just enacted, will also help in providing additional deterrent tools to our existing toolbox. And then the bullet below that, these existing tools are considered in our existing plans and will be used in due course as necessary. As I say, this set of speaking notes had been in various iterations and also ended up in an email that you sent to Mr. Jones, the Minister's Chief of Staff. Was this point that you mentioned here in your addresses to the IRG and Cabinet, was that also something you had expressed to, for example, Deputy Minister Stewart or Chief of Staff Jones before these speaking points were distributed or before your email on the topic?
I'm not sure of the timing. I know that there was an email exchange with the Chief of Staff, so I don't know if it was before or after this meeting.
If it helps you, it was short. It was in between the IRG. It was, if you look at the time stamps, It was right in between the IRG and the Cabinet meeting. You sent, in effect, these points, including, your speaking points, including these two bullets here. Had you had these discussions about your views on existing authorities with any of the officials before the circulation of these notes?
Yeah, I think we would have been exchanging verbally. Like Deputy Commissioner Duhem said, it happened so fast. There was, Deputy Minister was working on this. We weren't in the working group. We were just brought in as subject matter experts on various authorities that, potential authorities, but we weren't in the drafting of any of this. That wasn't our role. So this would have been provided probably verbally. We would have spoken about it, and then obviously because I was asked in an email, it was provided in writing.
Right. If I can ask the clerk to call up PB NSC CAN 408041. This is another one of the Teams chats. And if you look at the timestamp again, allowing that these are stamped 5 hours ahead of the time zone that we would have been here in Ottawa. You'll see the date is February 13th, and if you just look from the first page to the last, you see it covers a period of time up to, looks like 6:35 p.m. at the very end. Are you able to, if I ask the clerk to scroll ahead to the end of the document, just so that Commissioner Lucky can see the range of the discussion there. The point I wanted to draw your attention to in this particular Teams chat, Commissioner Lucky, is at page, well, it's page 19 of this document. Mr. Clerk, maybe if you can find that. If you go down to the first, yeah, there we are. Now, if we look at the timestamp at 10:21 p.m., this would actually be, if I understand correctly, 5:21 p.m. Is that right?
Yes.
And now you're nodding there, Commissioner Lucky, but the transcriber will want to hear yes or no. Thank you. And again, just to, so the parties and viewing public can understand what's going on here, this is a discussion that you and your team are having sort of offline. These aren't actual comments in the meeting. You're, well, were you present at this IRG meeting? I believe this was the IRG meeting of the 13th.
I believe so, yes.
So have you got your phone out and you've got your team watching it on their computers in their offices, perhaps?
I may have been there in person. I'm not sure.
You think the team was actually there?
No, the team wouldn't have been there, but I might have been there in person, or it
Right.
could have been on video. There was a couple on video,
Right.
and so I don't know which one.
Well, you might get some insight as we go through
Okay.
your comments here, because you're asking somebody in the first entry here whether you are the next up on the agenda. Someone suggests that
Yes.
you're not, and then someone says situational updates, et cetera. The next is you. And so, and the question we're wondering, it then goes over to, if this, Mr. Clerk, if you can just scroll down the page. A point where there's a entry under Flynn Mark on page 20. That's it. Situational update. And then it says under number 2, Minister Mendicino may turn to Commissioner Brenda Lucki. And I guess since these are from your notes, you may also ask to speak, et cetera. Do you figure that that's where you got asked to give the situational update with respect to Ottawa?
Possibly, yeah. There was always usually a spot for a situational update. Sometimes on the ERG, there was always usually a spot for me to provide a situational update, depending as they got closer to the, there was one that I believe I didn't provide much of an update because there was a discussion mostly on the Emergencies Act. So it wasn't about me providing information, it was just them discussing the Emergencies Act.
Could we have 8041 brought up on the screen? Sorry, PBNSC CAN 408041.
That's what this is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. Then it's page 12 of that document I'd like you to look at. And there's a section under Mark Flynn. And I'll just read it for you. OPS just confirmed the plan is finally reviewed and approved. Their planning group will integrate here with our group.